Ready? Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Kelly. I'm the Chair of the Board of County Commissioners for Johnson County, Kansas. We're here for an agenda review. Today is May 29th, 2025. We'll be reviewing the board agenda for June 5th, 2025. I'll note that all commissioners are present, and I'll ask the clerk if she could please read item number 1.
Consider approving the May 15th, 2025 business session minutes.
Any questions regarding the business minutes? Seeing none, how about number 2, please?
Clerical error 046-087-36-0-10-07-01.00-0. Consider authorizing the county appraiser's office to make an appraisal correction to the 2024 tax roll for commercial real estate pursuant to KSA 79-1701A.
Carolyn Logan here to present this item. Ms. Logan,
Good
welcome.
morning. So I bring to you a clerical error made by my office with a BOTA order, a Board of Tax Appeals order that was issued in November of 2024. It involves this piece of property at 13500 Antioch Road in Overland Park. The property owners filed an appeal, which the Board of Tax Appeals heard and ruled in their favor. The change was a no-value change, but it was a classification change issued by the Board of Tax Appeals. My office incompletely did the data entry, so we got the no-value change correct, but we missed the data entry on the classification change. The correction results in an assessment difference of $243,000. So we respectfully ask that you would correct our error.
Thank you very much. Questions regarding this correction after the BOTA decision? Commissioner Ashcraft.
Is the error in the county's favor or the taxpayer's favor?
The taxpayer's favor.
Thank you.
Ms. Logan, thank you very much. How about item 3, please?
Consider approving a no-cost agreement with AT&T to add bidirectional antenna equipment to the courthouse.
We have Rick Gilsoff here to present this item from the Department of Emergency Communications. Welcome back, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mr. Chair, thank you. Yes, the issue is to consider approving this no-cost agreement with AT&T to add a BDA or bidirectional antenna equipment to the courthouse. A little bit of background on this is when the building was constructed over there and after we took occupancy, Pearson Wireless, who is our consultant who manages a lot of the radio frequencies and the cellular frequencies within that building, that feeds into this building, they noticed some dead zones in there, particularly with cell phone coverage. So they fine-tuned and did what they could with the equipment that's already there in relation to Verizon, Sprint, and AT&T. But they said that the issue lied with the carrier to provide a mini cell, basically BDA, what we're asking for today, to be installed in the courthouse. So we reached out to all the carriers. AT&T was the only one who responded, and this is where we are today.
Mr. Gilsoff, thank you very much. A couple quick questions for you. Other carriers, do any other carriers, how many cell towers are currently on the courthouse? Are there others other than the AT&T addition we're looking for right now?
No, sir.
Okay. At other facilities in Johnson County, we typically have a no-cost, no-fee agreement with other carriers at various other county facilities, Arts and Heritage, et cetera.
Yeah, this is the only other facility that I know of that has something similar to that or to this, and it is also with AT&T. No other carrier there either.
Okay.
And that is also a no-cost
Okay.
agreement.
Thank you. Commissioner Burr?
Yes, I just had a question about, I didn't see or get the sense out of the briefing sheet on, so this, when I think of antenna, I think of old-fashioned antenna, so clarify for me, where does this equipment go? Is it something interior to the building, exterior to the building, noticeable, not noticeable?
Not noticeable, and it'll be a little bit of both. So there's a data room, obviously over there that runs a bunch of other computer equipment over there, and so it'll be housed in there, and then there's a very small antenna that goes on the roof.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow on to your questions, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gitzoff, is it common for governments and businesses that provide optimal antenna locations to provide those locations for free to companies like AT&T?
I'm not sure if it's common, Commissioner. I think the only other agreement or situation that I have experience in is with the Arts and Heritage Building.
And is that one free?
It is. We do not have any lease payment or rental payment for them to put
Okay.
virtually the same equipment in their data room over there. I will say that we did a rough order of magnitude to understand what the power consumption is at the Arts and Heritage to compare to what this might be. And they said on the high end, it's around $40 a month.
Okay.
So.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to learn a little bit more about what our policy is versus what it should be on this item. I realize it might not be a significant draw for this antenna, but I just wonder if we're providing this service for free, what should be the reasonable market compensation? Because I'm sure others around the county, businesses, governments, whatever, provide location space for these antennas. And if it's common that it's free for these service providers, then that's a fair argument. But I'd like to know what our policy should be.
I can appreciate that, and hopefully in the next week, we can do a little bit of research on what some alternative arrangements may be for other buildings in other circumstances. But Mr. Gitzoff, the problem we're trying to solve here is not expanding the capability of AT&T customers throughout the county. Really, the impetus here is to improve coverage within the courthouse and the county facility, right?
Yeah, the courthouse and the administration building here, yes, sir.
So we're trying to impact the dead zones that are within our spaces. So really, it's a benefit to those who utilize the courthouse or the admin buildings. The goal of the relationship isn't necessarily just to get better coverage on Kansas Avenue, right?
Correct. That would not be affected at all. When you think about the personnel who work at the courthouse, specifically the sheriff's office personnel, as well as who's downstairs in Dan's group in the EOC, who I know they all utilize AT&T's FirstNet, this will greatly benefit all of those personnel, as well as the public as they enter in and out of these facilities. They'll have better cell phone coverage within this building.
So when we think about the benefit to AT&T, we also have to balance what the benefits are to the county and our operations by being able to have this located here, and really what the value is to us of that increased coverage. So just something else to consider as we're balancing these
That's
things.
a fair argument, Mr. Chairman. I'm just,
Not an argument, just a part of the conversation.
well, it's a fair conversation.
Thank you.
Could we move to action?
If you'd like, sure we
Please.
can. Commissioner Hanslick, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was basically going to say what you had said, that this, from what my understanding is, the purpose of this is, bottom line is public safety. And it's to our advantage to have AT&T put this antenna there. It's not to further their commercial investment in the area. It's for our advantage. And so thank you for saying that.
Commissioner Allen-Brand.
Thank you, Chair. And the same comment, there's areas in the building you can't even get reception. So I think there's a need for this, so I will support it. I think I'm glad you're looking at it. Thank you.
All right, well, we'll see you next week on this one. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Burr.
No worries.
Please go ahead.
I just had one additional question.
ma'am.
Does the addition of the equipment, since it's being provided through AT&T, preclude future contracting if you contract with other carriers? Does it affect being able to use equipment? Does the equipment have to change if the contract goes with a different carrier?
No, this equipment is specific to those frequencies that AT&T and their technology use. So if Verizon or Sprint, T-Mobile as it is now, decide to put equipment in that same data center at the courthouse, it would just rely on their specific equipment frequencies that tie into your cell phone.
Perfect. And the motivation of that question is it doesn't lock us into a long-term relationship with a particular carrier. We still have the ability, when we have to go out and change or rebid or anything like that, we still have the ability to make those decisions separate from this equipment being installed.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Not seeing any other questions at this time. We'll see you next week, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you all.
Would the clerk read item 4, please?
Resolution number 057-25. Consider adopting resolution number 057-25 to delegate authority to the county manager or designee to enter into housing agreements with other counties in the state of Kansas to house juveniles while they go through the adjudication and post-adjudication process.
Robert Sullivan from the Department of Corrections here to present this item. Welcome back, sir.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Robert Sullivan here on behalf of the Department of Corrections. I'm also joined today by the Director of our Juvenile Services Center, Ellen Hawks. This resolution, it would delegate authority to the county manager to enter into juvenile housing agreements with other counties in the state. This would leverage our available capacity at the Juvenile Services Center to support regional detention needs while generating revenue and allowing us to maximize our existing resources. So what prompted the request? Stable admissions and reduced length of stay trends that we're seeing at our Juvenile Services Center has resulted in some extra capacity. The facility is currently staffed with 40 beds and only has 2 vacancies, and we believe those vacancies will be filled by June 16th. Neighboring counties have expressed interest in temporarily housing with us due to resource shortages that they're experiencing. As far as the details of this proposal, the county manager or her designee will be authorized to execute agreements with recommendations from the director of our Department of Corrections. We have a template housing agreement and resolution that have been reviewed and approved by legal and our budget office. Participating counties would pay $150 a day, daily per youth, plus all medication and off-site medical costs. Additionally, we retain the right to refuse or terminate housing for any out-of-county youth that we're lodging at any time. As far as benefits to Johnson County, it creates offsetting revenue for services that we're already staffed and budgeted to provide. It'll support regional public safety and youth services collaboration. And it provides a fiscally responsible utilization of our current fixed operational costs. As far as safeguards, no agreement exceeds 5 years without further review. Agreements are non-binding on the minimum youth housed. Johnson County assumes no liability for out-of-county juveniles before or after custody transfer has taken place. And agreements include medical care reimbursement, clear transportation responsibilities, as well as other legal safeguards. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Well, Mr. Sullivan, thank you very much. I think this is a reasonable matter of which I support. And I don't believe it's too long ago when, due to circumstances of co-defendants within our county, we needed collaboration with other counties to house co-defendants separately. So the opportunity for collaboration with various counties, I think is important to the overall process of justice within not only Johnson County, but our neighboring jurisdictions. So I support it and I appreciate you bringing it before us. Thank you. Commissioner Hanslick, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. What's the average daily census in the juvenile detention center?
Right now, like this morning, we have 9 youth in our facility.
9 youth, and we're staffed for 40.
That's correct. And then I think over the last 12 months, we peaked at 31 on any given day.
Okay. Has there been any thought to whether we need to be staffed for 40 on an ongoing basis? I'm just curious. You said 31 was the max, but
No, we have given thought to that, and those are conversations that we regularly have as far as our resource allocation. And it's when we get into, Chairman Kelly alluded to, if we have court-ordered no contact, we have 4 living units in the facility. There's 10 beds in each living unit. And so we sometimes will have to open up an empty unit so that we can comply with no contact orders. And so there is convenience to having that. And then when we do peak, even if it's for a short while, we will utilize all 4 of those living units when we peak.
well, I appreciate that, and I support this. I think it's a great way to utilize those empty beds to the extent possible to support the costs of, it's kind of like having a library. The books are in there whether people check them out or not. But the cost is still the same to make it available, so thank you.
Commissioner Fast.
Have any counties expressed interest?
Yes, we have had counties express interest, and they've been patiently waiting for this process to work its way through.
Kansas or Missouri or both?
We're only looking at Kansas.
Okay.
Commissioner Allen Brand.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I support this 100%. I've been over and touring your facilities, and I think this is a smart approach. Plus, I think it would also keep people in their areas, so, in their communities. So, thank you.
We'll go Commissioner Byrd, then Commissioner Ashcraft.
Mr. Sullivan, I also support this. I just have a couple questions for you, just so I make sure I'm understanding everything. And also, I'll just say, in a different state, I worked with a different youth-serving organization. They had dedicated bed space for out-of-state, out-of-county placement. So that's where my questions are deriving. Because in that particular situation, it was a bed that was always available, that was paid for year-round by that state. In this case, it was state of Nebraska. They held the right to have that bed so that it was available at any time for utilization. What I'm hearing from your description and from the briefing sheet is this is going to be available with those to which we have a relationship with on an as-need basis if the capacity exists. Is that a correct?
That's absolutely correct, Commissioner.
Okay, so as we get into this relationship, if you have some counties who are willing to have a dedicated bed space, especially since the census data that you provided, Commissioner Hanslick, indicates that typically we're not at the 40-bed capacity, is that something that you're open to consider too? That becomes like, the organization I was that I was working with, it basically became that dedicated bed space for that out-of-county placement that was always available 24/7, because we know sometimes bed utilization doesn't happen in the middle of the day, it's needed in the middle of the night. And so it created a sense, a little bit of a assurance of consistency. I just didn't know if that model was looked at.
It was looked at, and it might be that Ellen has some additional comments she'd like to make, but we felt like going with this approach put us in the best possible position. There are absolutely upsides to having that model, and it is only something that we'd be willing to consider. But we just felt like it's put us in the best position to be able to have that flexibility and give us a little bit more control over the population that we're serving.
Well, and I agree with you. I think if you're going to go into it, going in, this puts you in the driver's seat a little bit more, and then over time, if you determine that, yes, we could do a dedicated bed, you have some good data to know if you should be there. And then my only other question is that $150 a day. 2 questions on that. Is that the going average? And because this has been going back 20 years when I worked with this organization who did the dedicated bed space, and I can't tell you what their daily rate was. And 2, how much of cost recovery do you have for that? I understand that that's not it. That the sending jurisdiction is responsible, I'm assuming, not only for medication, but also for transport.
That's correct. So I would say the custom in Kansas has been $150 a day.
Okay.
Would probably be the best way to describe that. I believe there's one detention center that charges $300 a day. The one that does that escapes me right now. So Shawnee County charges $300 a day, but all the other 8 juvenile detention centers, the custom, if you will, has been $150 per day per youth. And so we're in line with that. With regards to cost recovery, I would say, looking at our average costs, it would be easily double that $150 a day amount. And obviously, that average cost would fluctuate with our population. So the higher our population, a little bit, that cost comes down a little bit. But it's not close as far as what the average costs are. And then, of course, our marginal costs would remain the same, just a little bit of an increase per youth.
But it's in alignment with what the majority of the state is doing, so you're
That's
trying
correct.
to, in that class.
Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Commissioner Ashcraft, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Brewer, thank you for your question. I'm trying to process that. Mr. Sullivan, did I understand you correctly that our actual daily operating costs are close to $300 a day?
I think it's over $300 a day. It's been a while since we looked at that. The last time I looked at that, it was a little bit over $400 a day, if memory serves me correctly.
Per individual?
Right, depending on what our population is on the
Correct.
day that we ran that analysis.
So does this 150 cover our marginal costs?
Oh, it would absolutely cover marginal costs. It's just, it will not cover an average cost. So if we're trying to look at fully recovering our costs, every detention center would be in the exact same position as us.
Okay. I need to process this a little bit more. I mean, conceptually, I commend you for doing this. There have been discussions about the jail doing this also over the years, and I think there are a lot of benefits, but I need to understand better kind of the cost-benefit analysis that you've done. So maybe before next week, we could visit on this.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, let me try to summarize so at least I understand it. We have a sunk cost for operating this youth detention facility, and it is X. And that allows us to peak at 4 units of 10 apiece. So when we reach that 31, we will have reached peak, and we need the capacity of these 4 detention centers. Now, regardless of how many are in there, whether it's 9, 11, 31, or 36, by housing other juveniles at $150 a day from outside counties or jurisdictions, we have an opportunity to recover that $150, which covers our marginal cost and probably then some, a little bit more, which is more than we otherwise would receive from not housing these other juveniles, which is zero. But when we have a cost for operating the facility and we average that over the number on any given day, that daily rate is going to vary. So this is an opportunity not necessarily to recover that full sunk cost that we have just by operating this facility, which we need to be able to keep the county safe. And in doing so, also have collaboration and relationships with the other jurisdictions who also house youth detainees. Fair enough?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Well, Commissioner Fast.
Yeah, I mean, we've had discussions, maybe was it 2-3 years ago, about the needs at the juvenile detention center. I recently did a tour with CJAC. I mean, there's major updates, and with the sales tax renewal, to me, you should be center in that renewal campaign. I mean, because, I mean, you really need to modernize that whole facility for where we are today with housing youth and to have, you know, different steps in that continuum. I mean, what is your highest needs right now in those modifications?
Well, when we talk about staffing footprint, if you modernize the facility, you could have a positive impact on what your staffing footprint looks like. But also, too, I think as you referenced on the tour, I think you'll see that we just try to do the best we can with what we have with a older facility, trying to make it as therapeutic as we can for the population that we serve while maintaining that safety and security environment.
Commissioner Hanslick.
I was just going to mention, thank you, Commissioner Fast, for bringing that up. I was just looking On June 4th of 2020, we did do a virtual study session about this topic, and it's actually available on Facebook if you want to review it.
Not seeing further questions. Mr. Sullivan, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And Ms. Hawks, thanks you very much for being here today.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like that on action.
Okay. Will the clerk read item 5, please?
Consider approving an interlocal cooperation agreement with the City of Olathe for 50% cost sharing of the design and construction for a new parking garage in downtown Olathe in an amount not to exceed $11 million.
Adam Norris from the County Manager's Office here to present this item. Mr. Norris, thank you very much. Looks like you're set to go.
All right, thank you. Yes, for your consideration is an interlocal agreement with City of Olathe. This would be a 50% cost share for the design and construction of a new parking structure just adjacent to the courthouse in downtown Olathe on the north side of Santa Fe in an amount not to exceed $11 million. Just a quick history on this. So in 1989, there was an interlocal agreement entered into between the county and the city, which built the first parking structure adjacent to the admin building. This was, again, a 50-50 cost share with the city owning and maintaining the parking structure. Then in 2006, another interlocal agreement was entered into to build onto the original structure that added 310 parking spaces. Both these agreements, 50-50, and the city owns and maintains the parking structures. Flash forward a few years, the new courthouse was complete in 2021. Trials and visitors during that time were limited due to the pandemic. However, once some of those the restrictions were lifted, there's been a steady increase in visitors and staff to the courthouse. This has resulted in increased parking demands on the north side of Santa Fe, placing demands on several different parking assets in that area. As visitors to the courthouse choose parking based on what's available and what's convenient and within close proximity, a number of courthouse users often choosing to use the Olathe City Hall parking lot. So that impacts how Olathe conducts their business and limits access to those facilities. It also has an impact on many visitors also use on-street parking in the neighborhood, which causes a disruption to the neighbors in the area. So to evaluate this issue, we worked with Olathe on a parking study, and we shared in the cost on that 50-50, as we have with our other agreements. The bottom line is the study concluded that currently there's a deficit of 62 spaces within this area, including the courthouse, city hall, and the library lots. Over the next 10 years, this study also provided a projection for 10 years out. Over the next 10 years, there's anticipated to be a deficit of parking of over 200 spaces to support those three facilities. So here's just a general kind of layout of the site in question here. I want to point out something about ADA here. There are currently 8 ADA accessible spaces on the north lot in the courthouse. These are over 900 feet away from the entrance of the courthouse. The new structure would include an additional 8 ADA spaces. That would be 4 net new spaces to that site. That would be about approximately half the distance to the entrance of the courthouse. So this improves accessibility and customer service from that standpoint for certain. So there would be a total of 16 accessible ADA parking spaces within this area now. I'll highlight the interlocal agreement here and what this entails. Again, this is a 50-50 cost share up to a maximum of $11 million for the county's portion of this. So for instance, if the cost of the structure came in at $25 million, then our cap again would be $11 million. The city would have to cover the difference up to $14 million. So our obligation is limited under this arrangement. On the flip side of that, if the costs are lower than $22 million, then we enjoy the reduction of cost of that like Olathe does. We share in that equally in that savings. This would be a 3-level parking structure. It'd provide 379 spaces. That's a net increase of 225 new spaces that can be utilized for free for the public, the city, and county employees parking on a first-come, first-served basis. In addition to the ADA spaces that I mentioned, this will include 8 EV charging stations with conduit for expansion, so that would increase the net amount of EV charging stations by 2 for this area. By entering into the interlocal agreement, the county would be represented on all the selection panels and be part of the design build team and all the project decision-making. The city would serve as the project manager and appoint a project manager for daily oversight of the construction. The terms of the agreement would include the county making 2 payments to the city. The first within 30 days of construction commencing, that'd be a $5.5 million payment, and then the second upon substantial completion and final accounting of all the direct costs. As with the previous 2 agreements that we've entered into, the city would be responsible for ownership and maintenance of the structure after completion. Funding for this would be the county share. The parking garage would be budgeted from the proceeds of Public Safety Sales Tax 3, which is to be collected from April 1st, 2017 to March 31st, 2017. And one minor change here that will be reflected next week will be in the motion. We need to add that this would authorize use of Public Safety 3 reserves to that motion. So we'll make that adjustment for next week.
2027, I think.
Beg your pardon?
You said through 2017, through 2027.
2027, my mistake. 2017 through 2027. Thank you. All right, that concludes my presentation.
Mr. Norris, thank you very much. I appreciate that this proposal comes to us consistent with past agreements of share for parking within this downtown county square area, and appreciate that it doesn't just come from nowhere. Defining the need and doing the parking study gives us an idea of not only what's needed now, and there are insufficient spots now, but with the growth of downtown Olathe, we know that that demand is going to increase. But not only that, just the demand for the courthouse itself, with now the backlog of cases reaching jury trial and the vast increase of jury trials and the need for parking spaces to serve the courthouse, we recognize that there is a need for additional parking within this area. Not only that, I appreciate that you recognize the ADA need. That's something that's come to all of our attention through various constituents of the need for ADA access to the courthouse and making that convenient so that facility can serve Johnson Countyans of varying abilities. Just to clarify some of the points in your presentation, the county would have input and representation on the request for proposals, the contract award, the design considerations, but the city would ultimately be the contracting party. So when this comes to fruition, the city of Olathe will be, in its governing body, will be voting to approve that contract. It will be theirs to own, operate, maintain for the life of the project. All that correct so far?
Yes.
I guess the one question then is there been conversation or will there be conversation regarding dedication of certain spaces, whether and you mentioned ADA spaces, you mentioned EV charging stations based on the conduit and the opportunity for growth there. But has there been any conversation about control of certain spaces specifically for the courthouse and/or specifically for city hall, council members, et cetera? Have we gotten that deep into the project?
We haven't gotten that deep in the project, but I would say that fundamentally, the principles here would be, because of the cost share arrangement, that it would be a first come, first served basis for users within that area.
Okay. Commissioner Allenbrand?
Thank you, Chair. Well, this has been a long time in the works, and so the comment about having designated spaces, you look at other places like on the Country Club Plaza and some of the office spaces, they have actually designated spaces for time periods, Monday through Friday, and here's the times that's needed. So I would highly suggest that, not to go over everything the chair said, but having these different, looking at the ADA, that was one of the number one complaints that I received, was on ADA. Also hearing from, one of the things we did that we also followed up with, there were some attorneys that weren't even able to get through the doors because of ADA. And, being able to hit a button and open up a door because you're handicapped is important. So we've went in and we've added all those as well. And then I think we've added either 3 or 4 new courtrooms since the courthouse opened. I think I'm highly supportive of this. It's important to have the handicap parking. I think it's terrible that somebody goes down there and there's no place for them to park. To open this up, it's important. You heard the chair talk earlier during his comments about the revenue generated downtown. I mean, I think it's so exciting, and I receive calls. I used to receive all the calls about how upset they were that the courthouse was torn down and that there was nothing going on downtown, and I guess you have to be careful what you ask for because, I think the highest, Old Settlers was probably the highest generated persons, but it was 2,700 at one of the Fourth Fridays, and they've added more events, and people are commenting about that. The businesses are commenting about that in the surrounding area. So having parking, I think, is key, and so I support this. Also, have we done anything yet on the EV charging stations? Because I really feel like that we should be charging for those charging stations. And if we did charge, or if we've talked that far, would that revenue go to the city, or where does that revenue go?
We haven't discussed that detail with Olathe, but I'm going to make a leap here and say, since they are owning and operating it, if there were revenue to be generated,
take it.
they would
That would-
enjoy the benefit of
That
that.
makes sense. But I hope that we really take a look at that in the future because, I have friends that have all electric cars, so they brag to me how they pull up and they have free access. So they know where they're all at. So I think that that's something that we should be looking at. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Hanslick, then we'll go to Commissioner Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Norris. I have a few questions. First of all, how was the 50-50 split arrived at? Is that
Yeah.
indicative of the expectation of the use or just
Yeah.
because that's
Well-
what it was before?
I think there's precedent, which is healthy, right? I think a 50-50 split, this represents also a kind of a shifting of risk for the county. Owning and maintaining a parking structure is an expensive endeavor, and for us to be able to provide an initial lump sum and then, our investment is limited to that mitigates some of our financial risk in the future. I think the statistics are about $300 per year per space to maintain a parking facility, so that adds up pretty quick, right? So starting there, that's some of the basis for that. I think right now, the Olathe City Hall is closed, right? But the parking lot is full. So it's reasonable to assume that the users of that parking lot right now are users from the courthouse. So we are definitely impacting operations there, right? Whether City Hall is open or closed. If we get into kind of a parsing of costs, then we're going to get into, here's your restricted parking spaces. It becomes an operational and management challenge. So I think there are 3 or 4 reasons there why continuing with this 50-50 cost share is a reasonable approach.
Thank you. Another question is, how was it determined that the 8 ADA parking spaces would be adequate, especially when we're looking at a growing, aging population? And I share Commissioner Allenbrand's concern. I'd hate for somebody to get to the parking garage and all the ADA spaces are taken up, and they need to get to a hearing or something in the courthouse.
Yeah, so I think 8 would be the minimum, right? So as the design proceeds, that is the basic standard. And so that may be adjusted, it may not be, but that's kind of the minimum standard right there.
So that's not set in stone then?
Correct.
Okay, that's great to hear. And then what impact, if any, will there be on the existing lot that's north of the courthouse?
So that will continue to get used. That functions at capacity right now, and so the intent here is hopefully that alleviates some of that use, but it will continue to be a parking lot that is used going forward.
And it'll still have the ADA spots?
Yeah, 100%, yes. Yeah, there'll be, so right now there's 12, so this would increase the number to 16.
Thank you.
In that area, just to be clear, right?
Thank you. Commissioner Brewer.
So my questions are going to be centered on the ADA parking, echoing that was one of the areas that has received the most feedback after the building was constructed and open. I just will underscore, I think it's important that we, and first of all, thank you, Mr. Norris, for your presentation. As has been stated a number of times, this 50-50 split is in construction, then Olathe takes on ongoing O&M of the structure. So 50-50 is really just exclusive to the upfront cost of construction. So you shared in the presentation, and if you don't mind going to slide 3. That the construction of the parking garage basically provides not only some net new ADA spaces on the lot in which the garage is going to be constructed on top of, and then also shortens by 50% the distance between the entrance to the courthouse and the current ADA spots. So for me, because my original question is how many between the two lots that are existing now, how many are we gaining and where they're at? But you shared in a previous response to Commissioner Hanslick that the ADA spots on the current north lot would remain. Then the garage, which would take the place of the current surface parking, be north of the City Hall, would net 4 additional ADA spots and would decrease the distance from the building by 50%. So for me, it begs the question, why would we continue having ADA spots in that north surface lot of the courthouse that's already 900 feet from entrance, has been a large part of consternation? Why wouldn't we convert those to regular parking spots, since we're taking a first-come, first-served basis, so they're still available for somebody entering either building? And why wouldn't I want all my ADA spots that not only are close to City Hall, right, for City Hall visitor, but decreases the distance to the courthouse by 50%. It just, to me, it would be logical to put them all in that space that is more convenient to both buildings than to keep the surface lot space, ADA spaces on the north lot behind the courthouse. I'm just throwing that out for consideration.
That's a good suggestion. That's something if this were to proceed, that's something certainly we can bring up in the design process. I'm not certain that even if we added spots in the parking structure area, that we wouldn't be required to keep those other parking spaces. But that's something certainly we can look at if we proceed down this road.
Because my understanding is when this became an issue and received some public comment around this concern, is somehow having a north entrance to the courthouse closer to the parking lot was not practical or doable. So, yeah, I would just advocate if it's a shared lot and if the purpose is to serve both buildings, I would love to see if there's a pathway to have that then be a more practical solution to what we currently have.
Commissioner Myers, then Ashcraft, then Fast.
Thank you, Chair. I too am worried about sufficient space as a whole with this parking garage, but also with ADA. My concern is there's a lot of development going on in that area. And when the city becomes the maintainer of that lot, what are we going to be able to do, for instance, if all this development is utilizing this lot, this parking garage for employees, and of course, we know we're going to be utilizing it for employees, the number of spaces that are going to be available. I see this lot filling up very quickly. And again, with ADA spaces, when it's open to the general public, 8 spaces, 12 spaces, 15 spaces gets taken up very quick, not by the courthouse, but by existing businesses in the area. And I think we run into the same problem if there's, and again, I don't know how you could or how you would create those spaces to have open for uses for our county buildings versus the public buildings that are going to utilize that garage.
Sure. So if you want me to respond, I think the way the agreement works now is that we're getting access, right? That's by virtue of entering into this agreement and making this payment, we get access to the garage for free, and the public gets access, users get access. If that were to become a challenge or an issue in the future, that's something that we could revisit with the city and kind of manage through that. So that's certainly something we can kind of make clear now, that hey, if development becomes a good problem for you all to have, but then it becomes a rub for us to be able, our users, to access this garage, then we need to be able to talk about that.
Commissioner Ashcraft and Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have several questions, so put me on the timer when you'd like. Mr. Norris, I'll ask you this question, but I see that Ms. Symes is in the audience, so if you want to pivot to her, please feel free. The use of public safety sales tax 3 funds is appropriate and would be authorized. I was wondering, based on current projections, what was the unused residual that we are anticipating, and once we subtract this 11 million out, well, what are we anticipating it to be in March of 2027?
Ouch. Yeah, so if this interlocal agreement were to be entered into, the projected balance at the end of 2027, or in March of 2027, would be anywhere from 30 to 32 million. That's assuming that sales tax collections continue to.
And that's a fair assumption. So the 11 million would come out of the 30 million, so there'd be approximately 20.
No, so I backed that out. So it's, if you exclude this payment, it would be, 40 to 42 million.
40 to 42
Correct.
million. Okay, very good. So the thought process previously had been that those monies are would we call them a reserve for courthouse use, if you allow me to call them that, would be available to help with the maintenance of that facility. It was originally projected to be a 75-year facility, so that 40 million, more or less, would cover incidental to major maintenance and rehab. So by spending it on a courthouse, how would that impact the long-term maintenance needs of the courthouse?
Sure. So I think we presented a general plan during the retreat to you all where any remaining balance here would go towards capital replacement plan for medical examiner in the courthouse. And so there are an asset replacement plans that we have that we would use to as the guide to and use these funds to address that asset management plan.
So is the 30 million sufficient to cover it for the life of the building?
Through 2041.
So through 2041. So it would be through 2050 or so if the 10 million was not spent on the garage.
I haven't done that math, but
Okay. Más o menos, okay, no worries. So the cost of these slots then, the net increase works out to be for the county about $49,000, and in total about $100,000, about $98,000 per slot.
no, I think the total the total project amount would be $58,000 per parking space.
But the net increase.
Okay, you're going off the net.
25.
The total parking spaces are 379, so,
Correct, but this investment is only going to net us 225. So
Okay.
that would mean for the value of that net increase is about 100,000, a little bit under 100,000 per slot.
okay.
Okay. So my next question related to that was, when we demolished the homes and businesses north of the courthouse, that had a cost to provide that parking. What was the approximate cost per parking space that effort cost the county? Do we have any?
I'll have to give you that answer later.
Okay, I'm just curious about that. So, and I was looking at this, and what I found, I mean, there are a couple of different arguments here, but an interesting point, Mr. Chairman, when the courthouse was originally proposed, one of the core arguments for the new courthouse was to improve ADA access. We even had a picture of the former city clerk in a wheelchair facing the steps going up, and so that was a big push, big rationalization for moving to a new courthouse. And now we're talking about access in a different way, just the distance of it. And I think it's a fair argument, but it's interesting how that has evolved. So I would agree having additional ADA access points or to the courthouse based on its configuration makes a lot of sense. But one of the questions that had come up earlier was, Mr. Norris, you said there was about a 62 slot deficit currently. One of the things that was presented by, I believe by city staff a number of months ago was that there were county employees parking in the city's lot rather than going to the north lot. Was that remedied before decision to move forward with building a parking garage was presented?
I mean, that is part of the challenge we're trying to address here. So the city contemplated a permit restriction on that parking lot, but decided not to proceed at that time and may well in the future.
So that's still an issue. We have county employees or court employees primarily that are using their lot?
I think we have court users, whether those be employees or people attending trials, they're using it, yes.
No,
Commissioner Ashcraft, would you yield to
I will
others?
yield.
Thank you. Commissioner Fast?
Yes, this has been an issue that I've spent a lot of time on since it was built. I started hearing from a lot of constituents, and Joe Waters and I met with the chief judge, we met with Olathe. And one of the issues I'm still concerned with that is it is a long way when you park in that north lot with ADA. You got to go all the way to the south end. If you're in a walker or a wheelchair, that is a long way. So often what people do is that they have people drop off in Santa Fe. There's no bench there, and you will see people waiting on Santa Fe too, and there's nowhere for them to sit. So we need to really work on that, because people will continue to drop off in Santa Fe, or they drop off by the building on the north end. And these ADA slots really need more. 4 is filled now all the time. Because if you have 2 or 3 trials, several of the judges told me the majority of the people often in their juries are older people. Those are the, people often that accept, have time. And so when there's 2 or 3 jury trials, there's way more than 8 people ADA. So I don't know how we can negotiate that, but if we're paying 50%, and the placement of those ADA need to be on the south side of that parking garage, because those northern ADA, really, that's a long ways for people, in our own parking lot. So is that, I guess that's what I'm requesting, is that we negotiate that they're on the south side and that we have more than 8 slots. I mean, the whole reason that we went to new courthouse was to have more accessibility. I went and found all the articles on it, and that was the big selling point. And then we get a new courthouse, which a lot of people said, it's very pretty, but then it's not accessible, and because security's on the south end. And so I don't know if, I talked to the judges, could we have motorized scooters? Do we have, somebody that comes out, to assist somebody? Or is there, if there's the seniors are in a jury, can they put a slot where they park, So I just ask for further consideration in the negotiation, since we are coming to the table with 50%, because this will be an ongoing issue if we only have 8 slots.
So everyone's had at least one chance to speak. We'll continue the conversation if that's the direction of the board. But I think one thing that I'm definitely hearing from just about everybody here is that a priority for ADA access is the rationale, or part of the rationale for the county's participation here. So if we look at the agreement itself, in Article 1, when we define the purposes of this agreement, maybe adding that sentiment there, or if we look at Article 4, which is the design and construction, the design plan specifications, et cetera, for the garage, maybe there's an opportunity within that process that comes to the city, subject to the review and approval by the county, that a prioritization in location and access of ADA. What I fear is if we lock ourselves into 10 or 12 or 14, we can't necessarily quantify today what the need's going to be in 2035. And I don't want to necessarily limit us to that need, but whether it be an evaluation process or whether it be a conversation with the city at a time specific on ADA access and the needs of the courthouse, and to have that kind of opportunity to impact the placement of ADA or the increase of ADA over time, may well bode to the sentiments that we're hearing here. So just some considerations as we continue the conversation. Commissioner Allenbrand.
I do one follow-up. It's in my district. So I feel very strongly about the parking garage on county and city employees having, it's like a permit, and there's space designated. I've done them in building senior living apartments and in garages. And if we don't do that and you do something on a handshake, then down the road, you don't have any leverage. So it's really fairly easy to do. I know even our parking spaces, if you've got construction going on downtown, there's, and you come on an off day, not on a Thursday, there's no place to park. It's full. So I think that's something that we really, for me to support it, I really feel like, and they've done this study, so they have those numbers, but, the growth from when this courthouse was actually talked about in the period of time, look at the growth and look at how many seniors now, that need, not just seniors, but ADA. So anyway, so those are my comments, and that's something I feel pretty strongly about, so.
Commissioner Burr.
Thank you. Just a couple follow-ups based on some of comments and questions of my fellow commissioners. Going back to Commissioner Meyer's concern about, is this going to give us enough capacity? In the presentation, we've got 225 net new spaces, but can you tell me between the proposed garage and the north lot, what's the total number of spaces that become available once this is all said and done?
You have the courthouse north lot and the south lot. The south lot has 91 spaces, the north lot has 132 spaces. And then this would add another 379.
So is the 379 means all spaces between the courthouse and the city hall?
No, that's the new, the parking structure would be 379.
Okay, so that's the 91 plus 132 plus 379.
Correct.
And that gets us total, because one of the questions that I had then is if that north lot is of a size and configuration that as we can think about future growth and future demand, especially as buildup occurs within the downtown area, is that a potential future site for a parking garage? I don't know enough to know if that configuration allows for that as a future consideration.
I mean, it may well. I mean, I think early in the courthouse design process, that was briefly evaluated. So that's something that in the future, if the demands reached a certain point, that could be an option, and potentially the same kind of arrangement that we're contemplating right now.
And then in response to Commissioner Fast's observation that some folks are needed to be dropped off in front of the courthouse by a secondary, driver or partner so that they have the easiest access, and bear with me, I can't remember, is there currently a cut-in right now in
No.
that area? And something that is signed that says that this is a drop-off location, not a parking location? Because I think you bring up a very good point. There's checking the box of having enough spaces, and then there's really understanding how lived experience looks like for somebody who has limited mobility, and are we doing other considerations of limited mobility, like a cut-in curb, space where somebody can actually pull in out of traffic and safely let somebody off, like having seating there, so if that person's going to wait while the other person parks. I mean, those are all important, in my opinion, important considerations. I know it's outside of the garage, but we're talking about this issue in the big picture. I think those are things we might want to think about. And then finally, the slide that we have yet up, the project limits scope, it looks like it goes into the road behind, north of the parking garage. Is that road impacted?
No, just during construction, it would be limited access, but the structure would not go into the road there. Yeah.
But the limited access, since those houses look like they have, I can't tell from the graphic if they have alley parking or if they are in fact connected or back garages. I mean, are those residents still going to be able to have access to their homes during that construction?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's still accommodated.
And those are all kind of project management items
That's fine. I just, it was
worked out
confusing to know if that was.
Yeah,
permanent
that hash
footprint or
line is a little
temporary.
misleading, but yeah, it's,
Okay.
So to your point, Commissioner, to your prior point, Commissioner Burr, doing the math, it looks like between the north and south lots, there's 223 spaces currently for the courthouse. The net new spaces is 225, so this more than doubles potential parking at the courthouse. And when you include all the spaces, so the 379, it would be over 600 spaces. And I think there's also real value to consider in structured parking as opposed to lot parking, not only for longevity, but also for weather, et cetera, and for access. Commissioner Hanslick.
Thank you. To follow up on the ongoing discussion, two things. One is, I think whatever we end up doing, I'd really encourage us to have a comprehensive look at signage throughout the whole downtown Olathe area, because I don't see much signage. If I'm driving down here to be on a jury, it's really hard to figure out where you're supposed to go. So I think whatever we do, I would encourage the county to work alongside the city to have very clear signage where people can find ADA parking, where people go for jury parking, where people go for city hall parking, because I think we could do a better job on that. The other question I had was in regard to the ADA. Is this something our DEI coalition could have some input on? Do we have members of that coalition who have expertise in planning and around mobility issues? I know like the Whole Person and other agencies in the area, when I was with Safe Home, we had them come out and do a whole assessment of our facility and make some suggestions from people who actually have to live with this, whatever it ends up. So that's another suggestion.
Thank you. Commissioner Allen Brand.
I'm sorry, just very quickly, I want to add that they have had several attorneys and other people that have disabilities that have been a part of this study. So just to let you know, there's been a lot of research and a lot of study going on even before Mr. Norris came here. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Commissioner Ashcraft.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to ask if Mr. Norris could visit with me. I still have a number of incidental and clarifying questions, if I could, before next week.
All right. Consent? No, we'll see it on action next week. Thank you very much. Would the clerk read item number 6, please?
Request for proposal, RANDFP 2024-027. Consider authorizing a contract with K&H Election Services for elections printing and mailing services at a cost not to exceed $615,000 for an initial period of 1 year, with the option to renew for 4 additional one-year terms, with an annual cost not to exceed $615,000.
Fred Sherman, our election commissioner, here before us. Welcome back.
Good morning, glad to be here. Fred Sherman, Johnson County Election Commissioner. The item being presented to you for consideration would be approval or signing of a contract with a company called K&H Election Services. They're based in Seattle, Washington. And it would be for basically printing and mailing services for various items that we need and do throughout an election process. Probably in the, as noted in the background section of it, in 2017 was an initial RFP process of when the election office kind of outsourced a lot of the X's and O's of doing the mail ballots and a lot of the printing process. The term of that contract that was awarded in 2017 had come to an life. In fact, the board here had actually extended it twice, I believe, in terms of getting through kind of a sole source action with a promise that we would come back and do a new RFP process. So in late last year, we did formally, through the Johnson County purchasing process, did submit an RFP process, contacted a number of firms, and went through kind of a formalized process of awarding that component to a competitive bidding process. If you look on the second sheet, there was a number, not just election staff that was involved. We had staff with wastewater, facilities, and as well as Parks and Rec that were into mailing and printing items as well. Went through a scoring process. Initially, the K&H firm was not the top process, but when the costs were put in process, the system and the formula worked out where they were the top award getter of it. We concluded our election procedures and conducting the presidential election in '24, and once we took a little time to take a quick breath after that presidential election, we started working with this particular firm in terms of working out the details of this particular contract. We are satisfied. We have, it's taken time, and I'd say most of the delays in working through this has been on the elections, on myself and my staff in terms of working through the details of the contract and the logistics of working with a firm that is located 2 time zones away, 1,800 miles away, and making sure that we would have sufficient checks and balances to make sure that the delivery of services is done, because this would not be something that we want to just say, yeah, you got close and didn't quite get them delivered in time. So presented to you would be the background information, and the actual action item would be contract or execution of the contract, which would be for initially 1 year with 4 one-year renewals. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sherman. I'll open this to questions. Commissioner Hanslick, go ahead.
Thank you. 2 questions I have. One is, in looking at the list of services covered by the proposed contract, it doesn't appear that it includes mailing out ballots that have been requested by voters. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, the second bullet item under services is printing and mailing of voter information pieces prior to all regular elections. That includes the primary election and the general election in November. In the state of Kansas, voters can vote any one of 3 ways. They can vote in person at their designated polling site on election day. They can vote in person during advance voting, or they can vote by mail under Kansas statutes. And Kansas is considered a no excuse by mail state. You don't have a specific reason, but you do have to make an application for each election cycle. So my staff and the seasonal workers will still process those applications that go through. Once we reach a certain point, we then basically turn over that list of folks that have requested a mail ballot to a particular vendor. It would be a new vendor for us, and that vendor then actually does the printing, the processing, the stuffing, and actually the mailing of those mail ballots to the voters.
Okay, I appreciate that because it's not immediately clear. So they would print and mail any requested advance ballots then?
Correct. And in fact, the mailing of those ballots during both the August primary election and the November general election is probably, although it's critical, that it was done correctly and timely and accurately, it's probably not the biggest dollar value aspect of them. This company or the service will also print what we call the logic and accuracy of the test ballots that we do. So every election, we go through a full what's called logic and accuracy testing process of all the equipment to be used, where we do a predetermined election. And we have to produce almost 10,000 ballots, sometimes more than that, where we will cast those ballots prior to Election Day on all the equipment to be used and tabulate them to make sure that the programming of the election is done correctly. And again, doing that in-house, if we have to print 10 or 12 or 15,000 ballots is cumbersome. So that's another service that's done through that aspect of is those test ballots. The other service that's done is probably the biggest cost in terms of the contract is the voter information packets that we mail out. Typically, we'll do one prior to a primary election as well as one in the November general election. Again, we'll do the design of it, but it works very well for us to basically take that digital file, put it in a computer, hit enter, and have a vendor basically do the printing, processing, and mailing of those.
I appreciate that. Just a second question is, I noticed that it says the estimated cost was $500,000, but I assume all of the proposals were above that, seeing that $615,000 was apparently the lowest. So can you explain the increase? Is it just inflationary issues?
The 500,000 is a budget number that we have currently for this particular year. The election cycle and the budget cycle for elections is not a year-over-year type thing. We go through 2- and 4-year cycles where our presidential years typically are our largest expense and cost. Years like this year in '25 where the local elections are a lesser amount and number. The cost basis, in fact, that was one of the kind of delays in getting this to you for consideration, is we wanted to make sure a true apples-to-apples comparison was done with all the vendors. So it wasn't so much as like, hey, give us one number, but it was different mailing scenarios and making sure the components of those were applicable in terms of the ratings from the bids that were submitted to it. Probably the second question that will come up is, why is it you only budgeted $500,000, but you have a contract amount in greater than that amount? And again, that contract amount is going to be based off an average year. Some years it's going to be less, some years it's going to be more, depending on which jurisdictions and how many mailings we have to do that component of it. So the contract, for the most part, is like your playbook, where you want to have all of your plays doing it. The budget we do on an annual basis is our game plan as we implement it on throughout the basis. So there could be years where we exceed that $600,000 number. If we have an extraordinary amount of requests for mail ballots or printing services, there's going to be years where it's well under it. That $500,000 is really what it is currently budgeted in the 2025 session for elections.
Thank you.
Quick question, just to build off of that. Given the change in Kansas law that only allows now elections to take place 3 times a year, does that give us a little bit more of a continuity in a year-to-year that we might consider, especially understanding that 1 year's a local cycle and 1 year's a statewide cycle and vice versa?
Great question. Once we go through a lap under this new game plan, we'll see how it really impacts us. The need for what's called special mail elections, when a jurisdiction considers to do a special mail ballot election, currently, prior to the change in the state legislation, they could pretty much call that election at any time during the year. There was some legislation implemented about a year and a half ago where they said not within 45 days, the windows of the August and the November general election. And then this last legislative session is when the Topeka folks established that all special elections need to be done on one day, and that's going to be the first Tuesday after the first Monday in March. The number and the complexity of those, again, to be determined, whether local jurisdictions and the size of those jurisdictions. In 2023, for example, we had a special mail ballot election for Blue Valley School District, City of Overland Park, and City of Olathe. Those are 3 large jurisdictions in the county, so that was a number that was probably high. It may be a little bit of a savings in that when the legislation was passed this past year, based off of really Johnson County and my insistence that we eliminate, currently you could not do overlapping jurisdictions on a special mail ballot election, that it had to be one jurisdiction only, which is why City of Gardner did theirs in February this year, so the Gardner Edgerton could do theirs in March and not have overlapping jurisdictions. The new law does allow overlapping jurisdictions, so that we could have a little bit of savings where 2 jurisdictions may have had 2 separate elections, now may only do it on one. But again, until we go through a full cycle, it's hard to determine what exactly the answer to your question is going to be.
No, and I think that's fair. Do you know off the top of your head what the expenditures were in 2024 for these printing and mailing services?
Not off the top of my head. We can track that down.
That's just curious.
Roughly, to give you some broad numbers, in November, which is a presidential year, we did in the neighborhood of about 50,000 mail ballots.
Okay.
Again, the biggest expense through the vendor is going to be more the mailing of those information packets, where we do mail information packets to every registered voter because they are personalized and specific to those voters. And we're 460,000, and we did that twice in 2024. So that's probably the biggest thing driving the cost, was those mailers of information packets versus the mail ballots per se.
Thank you. Commissioner Brewer?
Yes, I have a couple questions. One of them, Chair, you asked, and that's current contract cost. So I would like to maybe have that shared with us before we take action next week so we can understand what current costs look like. Second is, I was surprised on the background that previously it was determined to do the printing and the mailing services as 2 separate bids. I'm assuming that it used to be 2 separate vendors.
No, we had one vendor, and maybe it's confused of how it's written in the briefing sheet. And again, sometimes we've done things in-house, at other times we've decided maybe it's better to have a professional vendor who has the good printing and mailing services to do it. So Initially in 2017, the main scope of it was to do the mail ballots only. But we have, I would say, grow the scope of that original contract some by doing additional mailings as well, printing and mailing services.
Okay, because how it's written, election-related printing and mailing should be awarded separately due to unique needs and requirements involved. You know, I'm glad we're not doing it that way, and it confused me only because being involved in the past in, what I want to say, customized mail, printing and then mailing services, I don't know why you wouldn't bundle them together from a cost containment situation. Also, define average year. Not to exceed estimates include funding for estimated printing and mailing needs in an average year. I'd like to understand the definition of an average year, because I know, like, for instance, this year, we've already certified 5 elections, and it's May. So that would be helpful, because in that same paragraph, you're saying, hey, this is what we think our costs will be in an average year. But if we have something that exceeds 150,000 pieces in a non-average situation, then we're opening up the contract for potential reconsideration of cost. And then you add the law on top of that, the statute change, and the ability, it's good to hear that in that statute, it took away, you have to have distinct ballots, even if you have overlapping jurisdictions. I can see some cost savings there, but I could also see average year could look, the exceeding number could look different. So I'd like some more information on that. And then finally, we have elections every year. Does a one-year contract with additional one-year renewals make sense? Or do we create a little bit of a administrative and operational, overwhelming, for lack of a better term, put us in a situation, because I got to believe by the time you get done with one election cycle, 1-year contract, you're already well into the planning and needs for the second year. In Kansas, we have elections every year. So I was a little surprised that the contract term is a 1 year with 4 1-year renewals.
Let me address that one first. That's a structure that was implemented previously, and I think we're comfortable with that structure of basically trying to get more than just a 1-year agreement, that it's basically essentially a 5-year agreement. But it does give us some outs if there's a change, whether legislatively, whether operationally, or if the vendor is able not to produce in a satisfactory and met level. Because to lock into, say, a 5-year static contract, that could have some downfalls as well. So I'm comfortable with the 1-year renewals. That administrative renewal process is pretty benign and
Okay.
and is done regularly and was done in the past one as well.
So then the outstanding is the current cost of contracts and just having a better idea of how you define an average year.
Let me do that a little bit verbally, but we can get you a little more specifically. Again, the mail ballot component of itself is the one true variable from year to year in terms of how many mail ballots we send out, but it's probably not the majority of the cost of the contract of what we do with these type of vendors. An average year is going to basically consider that we're going to send out information packets before an August primary election, as well as a November general election. We will do test ballots, the logic and accuracy type of process for all of our elections, and that may be 3 elections going forward. We pretty much figured in 2. We do what's called list maintenance aspects of it as well, where we do some other national change of address kind of processing as well. So we went through that process and tried to get kind of an average year, but in terms of the true variable, we based it off of 150,000 mail ballots as an average. Now, as this board knows, if you could have a jurisdiction that has countywide jurisdiction that says do a mail ballot, that's going to be more than 150 mail ballots. In that situation, we would have to come back and have basically approval authority to exceed that amount. You could have 3 very small jurisdictions, DeSoto, Edgerton, and Spring Hill could all have, that's different than having Shawnee, Lenexa, and Overland Park. So average is hard to come with, and we use that basically that 150,000 mail ballots as kind of the benchmark or the median number to base this contract off of.
Thank you. Commissioner Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sherman, have we used K&H elections before?
So before, somewhat, yes. We had not used them previously. In fact, again, some of the delays of getting this to you was on elections in terms of working through the logistics of really two factors. One's geography and the fact that they're on the West Coast. The other one was a little bit of our concerns that we were going to become a small fish in a very big pond. This is their jam. This is what they do. In fact, other clients they have include King County, Seattle, where they're housed. They do Los Angeles County. There's about 4 other counties in California they do. I think they also have a couple of the metro counties in the Colorado-Denver area. They do Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. And those are all large mail operations where our 50,000 is going to be basically cups of water in the pool from that standpoint. So we spent some time with them and working with them. Based off the facts, we have competitive bids. When we did the special mail ballot for City of Gardner in February, we did that all in-house. The April mail ballot election that we just concluded with City of Lenexa, Gardner Edgerton School District, and City of Westwood, we did utilize K&N for that services. So we, based off a competitive process, we were able to kind of do a good test drive with this particular vendor, and we also did the last one with the Spring Hill School District with K&N. So no, not previously, but yes, we have done a couple test drives with them and are satisfied with their services.
Well, you answered my second question. I just want to make sure they were fully vetted and you're comfortable. It sounds like you are. In other arrangements, previous arrangements like this, purchasing has done what I would call is a sample cost analysis. They give examples of various things as a test to get cost comparisons. Did we do that in this case? So that's why. So that makes sense. Well, what I'm struggling a little bit with is K&H. While their costs were better, all the other criteria, they were lesser than Firm C, but the briefing sheet does not actually show what the cost comparison is between those two. Is that something that you could provide us before next week? Okay, thank you.
We'll see this on action next week. Commissioner, thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
All right, that's all the items that we have on agenda review, so our agenda review is adjourned. We'll have the clerk change the technology, and we will reopen the business session for an executive session. Thank you very much.